Always say something. A prize, motherfucker.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's going on, everybody? As we all know, mental health is a huge piece for me. And recently, as I become a better version of myself, I've decided that it's time for me to go to therapy because I understand how life can be a little overwhelming and we all need help navigating through the trenches of military service in and out of uniform. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, all you got to do is go to their site. Matter of fact, you can use my link right here. Answer a few questions and BetterHelp will match you with a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or computer via phone call or video chat or messaging, however you feel most comfortable. It's the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. You will be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you all from the comfort of your home. Visit betterhelp.com/MeechSpeaks and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
What's going on, everybody? It's that ordinary podcaster with the extraordinary thoughts that tells you to stop being great and be extraordinary. I'm your host, Demetrius Thickpen, also known as Meech Speaks, and welcome back to another episode of the Talkin Crazy podcast. Now, before we get started with this podcast, don't forget to head on over to your favorite streaming platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and leave this podcast an honest review, because this podcast deserves to grow just as much as we do. Now, before I even get started with this episode, I don't know who need to hear this, man, but to my family that's up in LA, you feel me? To my friends that's up in LA, all right? To my listeners that is up in LA, all right? My prayers is going out to you. You feel me? If you need a donation, please let me know. If I need to send a care package, please let me know. You feel me? If it's in my power, then I would definitely be able to do it, all right? I understand there's a lot going on right now, man, but one of the biggest things is that when I first started podcasting, a lot of work, man, like a lot of the groundwork was done in LA. From my first live show to a lot of the connections that I made were all done up in LA, man. So if my family, my friends, my listeners, man, like if it's within my power, please reach out to me. You know what I mean? And I'll do the best that I can. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. So I'm going to ask a quick question real quick, and I don't know who need to hear this, all right? But it's January 13th. How your New Year's resolution going? You know what I mean? Like, how's the New Year's resolution going? You said that you was going to quit smoking. Did you pick a cigarette back up? You said that you wanted to get your body right, start going to the gym, start getting in the shape. You probably said that you wanted to go do boxing or jiu-jitsu, or you just said that you wanted to get your shit together. Are you doing any of those things? You know what I mean? Like, are we still on track? Because Friday was National Quitters Day. And for those who don't know what National Quitters Day is that it's the day where everybody that usually says that, hey, I want to do a New Year's resolution, that's the day where they decide that this ain't for them. You feel me? As a person that quit smoking and you saying that, hey, I want to quit smoking and you did cold turkey, more than likely you picked up a cigarette before January 10th. You know what I mean? As somebody that goes to the gym and you decided not to go to the gym, hey, I completely understand. To get that into your routine and to continue to keep doing it, I understand. If it ain't for you, it ain't for you. And I say that, man, because I understand that life happens, things happen, shit happens. But one thing that I have learned about anything, especially when you talk about becoming a better version of yourself, if you don't believe that you can do it, you feel me? Like, if you don't believe that you can do it, then no matter what you buy, no matter what you do, no matter who you got around you, it don't mean anything because at the end of the day, you don't believe in it. You feel me? Like the narrative, like is that you give up. You feel me? The narrative is that the obstacles are always stacked in your favor. The narrative is that as soon as something goes wrong, you revert back to who you were. The narrative is that this used to be in your family. That's why it never works out for you. The narrative is that everybody is against you. That's the narrative. And until you decide to change the fucking narrative, you know what I mean? Like until you decide to rewrite the narrative, this shit just gonna continue to keep blowing up in your face. So with that being said, man, and just like what I said in the very beginning of this month, This month's episodes is all geared towards you, one, accomplishing that better version of yourself, two, you overcoming those goals. And just like what I alluded to in the very beginning, it's the narrative. You know what I mean? Like, it's the narrative, bro. And for those who understand what the narrative is the story that you write for yourself. It's the mindset that you have for yourself. You know what I mean? But the thing about a narrative is that you can always change that narrative. But a lot of people end up in a funky ass narrative or a negative narrative about themselves based off of how they were brought up, based off of the people that they were around, based off of the situation that they in, the situation that they constantly find themselves in. And that narrative for themselves, right, is who they are. You know what I mean? It's the trajectory of where their life is always going to go. If they ain't going to be shit, they come from a long line of people who ain't shit and they blame them. You know what I mean? If they can't quit smoking, they come from smokers. You know what I mean? That's why. If they can't do, it's always a reason. And one thing that I've learned is that if you believe that you can do it, that no matter what the situation is, I'm talking about odds can be stacked in your favor. People ain't even got to believe in you. Matter of fact, people can doubt you all through it, but because you believe in it, right? Because you write the narrative of saying like, yo, like I believe in it. You know what I mean? I believe in me. You're going to overcome it. But if you don't believe in it, right? Like if you don't believe in it, then no matter what the situation is, you can be surrounded by nothing but positive affirmations, people that give a fuck about you, people that are rooting for you. But as soon as there's an inconvenience, I'm talking about as soon as shit don't go the way that you want it to, guess what you about to do? Fucking quit. Because that's exactly who you are, a fucking quitter. I ain't trying to attack you. I'm just stating the obvious thing. And the thing that I've learned, you know, with 14 years, 15 years, is that the moment that you change that narrative, shit will start changing for you. I bring that up, man, because I always say it. I'm a shitbag Marine that transitioned into becoming a top tier performer. Now, before I talk about that, man, I just want to say this real quick. There's a big difference between being a shitbag and a piece of shit. And when you hear me say shitbag, I do not mean that in no disrespect. Okay, I don't mean it in disrespect. I ain't trying to talk down to you. I don't think you less than at all. All right, especially because I've been there. You feel me? Because I've been a shitbag Marine, I understand the trials and tribulations. However, though, and we both got to be honest about this, you know damn well you don't fit the aesthetics of what the military is. And if you in the Marine Corps, you know damn well you don't fit the aesthetics of what a typical Marine is. You know what I mean? Now, I ain't saying there's nothing wrong with being a shitbag, but just understand that you don't fit those aesthetics, okay? The typical shitbag Marine is sometimes, you know, uniform, boob blouses a little low, got the wizard sleeves, got the funky mustache, you know what I mean? Got the low rag. He don't fit the aesthetics. That don't mean that he a bad Marine, though. I will say that, okay? 14 to 15 years, I've come across a lot of shitbags, all right? And I'll tell you right now, they may not fit the aesthetics, but they probably the hardest working person there. They may not fit the aesthetics, but the Marines love them, and they going to take care of the Marines. They checking up on the Marines, and they genuine about it. And one thing that I have learned about it is that shitbag Marine didn't turn into that overnight. Most shitbag Marines usually got a backstory to what led them to this point, what made them disgruntled, what made them have an attitude, what made them, you know, gain a little bit more pounds than usual. I bring that up, man, because I remember, I think it was probably like my second duty station. You know what I mean? And there was this one guy there. And I'm talking about, dude was good at his job. 300 PFT. I'm talking about he was a wrestler at one point. You know what I'm talking about? Sports all through his life. And one day we was playing, I think it was like more than PT, we was playing football. Dude tore his ACL and meniscus. All right? I'll tell you right now, when that happens, is whatever was going for you, it ain't going for you no more. But he tore his ACL and meniscus. You feel me? Had to get surgery for it. Had to have this big ass brace. You feel me? Had to have this big ass brace. And because he knew his job, they put him in dispatch. And while he was in dispatch, he's excelling at dispatch. In fact, his attitude positive all the time. I'm talking about when you walk in, you gotta smile because he just giving off that good energy. But once again, he in a brace. He sit at the desk all day. He ain't PTing with us. You know what I mean? So although the injury eventually healed, he did put on a couple of pounds. And motherfuckers start calling him a shitbag. And I'm like, how y'all gonna call him a shitbag? This motherfucker knock out taskers with his eyes closed on a Sunday before he even get out of bed. Best guy at the job. But y'all call him a shitbag because he don't fit the aesthetic no more. So when I say that the shitbag Marine ain't necessarily a bad Marine, he ain't, you know? However, there's a big difference between being a shitbag and a piece of shit. I have come across a lot of pieces of shit, you know what I mean, in the Marine Corps. Look great in uniform, decent at their job, but they morally terrible. You know what I mean? Morally, they ain't even taking care of nobody. Morally, it's something bad about them. So on any given day, I will always rather be a shitbag Marine than a piece of shit. So when you hear me throughout this episode say shitbag, understand, I'm not being disrespectful. All right? I'm just stating something that we all know. Now, back to the story, though, because I was a shitbag Marine who transitioned into becoming a top tier performer. And when I first came into the Marine Corps, dude, like, I will tell you right now, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I'm talking about the east side of Detroit, Michigan, 48205. The past 18 years of my life, I spent surviving. You know what I mean? So when I came into the military, you feel me? I had one thing about me that always stood out. I had a bad attitude. And it wasn't necessarily I had a bad attitude. I just wasn't going for bullshit. You feel me? You ain't going to be able to talk to me a certain way and think that I'm going to be okay with it. You ain't going to be able to just say some shit to me and I'm going to just be able to smile about it. I'm going to see between the lines. You know what I mean? And if I don't say it, I can't hide it on my face. And because of those mannerisms, I didn't fit that aesthetic. And because I didn't fit that aesthetic, I got labeled as a shitbag. And because I got labeled as a shitbag, people treated me like I was a shitbag. You know what I mean? And at first, I didn't let it get to me. But eventually, I did. Start hanging around people who didn't give a fuck either. And slowly, I stopped giving a fuck. My body, I was still great at PT. I was learning my job, but my attitude just showed it. You know what I mean? And I remember I was having this conversation with this one sergeant. And I was like, man, you know, I would want to get on the board. You know, I remember asking, I was like, what does it take for me to be able to get on the board? And he looked at me and he laughed. And he laughed and said, like, you would never be a board Marine. And I don't know about you, but I took that personally. You know what I mean? Like, I took that kind of personal. And I remember going home, you feel me? Going home that night, or just going back to the barracks, you feel me? Like, just going back to the barracks and saying, I don't want to be like that. I want to be a board Marine. And in that moment right there, I decided I was going to change the narrative for myself. So when I tell you, man, there's power in changing the narrative, bro, there's really power. You can change the entire trajectory of where your career is, where your life is going, who you hang around. I'm talking about the entire trajectory based off of you just changing the fucking narrative. Now, one of the biggest things is that how do we get into these type of narratives? You know what I mean? For me, a good example is my upbringing. You know what I mean? Like I come from Detroit City. You feel me? Like I come from Detroit, Michigan. I ain't for all that bullshit. You know, I ain't never been for all that bullshit. So coming into the Marine Corps, I already had that perspective. Just like what I said in the very beginning about the shitbag. That shitbag Marine didn't start off like that. When he said yes to his recruiter when he wants to start the process to become a United States Marine, he wasn't like that. When he got to boot camp, he wasn't like that. He had the baseline of what a drill instructor was in front of him. He was not like that. Something happened that changed the trajectory. And over time, that's what his narrative was. And I cannot stress this, man. Like that narrative of who you are can determine whether or not you're going to be able to achieve or if you're not even going to be able to do it. Now, what makes somebody want to change their narrative? You know what I mean? Like when you really sit back and digest it and peel back the layer, like what is something that makes somebody really want to change it? Sometimes it might just realizing that you plateauing. Other times you may look to your left, may look to your right and just realize I don't like the direction I'm heading in. But for me personally, and for most people, you realize that you're tired of this. You don't like this at all. You don't like being treated like this. You don't like the direction that it's going. You feel like that you deserve more. Come on now. And in that moment right there, that acts as the catalyst for you to be able to change that fucking narrative about yourself. I remember being in my barracks room, sitting there, asking myself like, dog, man, like, how the hell he gonna sit there and say that I ain't no bored Marine? And at first, though, I went into this perspective of, well, fine then, man. Like, if he don't believe in me, then fuck it. I'll just stop doing it. But then I stopped myself. And I don't know who need to hear that part right there. I had to stop myself from falling into this. A lot of times, like, you get an opportunity to be able to stop yourself from falling into that bullshit. And I had to grab myself and I was like, nah, dog, like, if he don't believe in me, I'm gonna prove him wrong. You feel me? Like, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna end up on a board. Matter of fact, I'm gonna win meritorious. I'm gonna change that. And then I'm gonna come back and tell him, like, hey, you remember when you said I wasn't a board Marine? Guess what I am? A board Marine. And it may seem petty for some, but that was the catalyst that I needed. Now, I will always say this though, man, like, when you realize that about yourself, you also got to recognize your patterns. You feel me? You also got to recognize your patterns. A lot of times, man, like, we can say like, hey, man, like, this is the direction that I'm going in. I don't like it. But if you don't know how you're going in that direction, what's causing you to go into that direction, what keeps you into that direction, you're always going to end up in that direction because you can't recognize it. You can't recognize, it's almost like learning a different language. You feel me? And you see a notification. And as you driving, you constantly ignore that notification, but not realizing that notification, you feel me? Like that notification is letting you know, like, hey, you about to do some bullshit. You about to go back into who you was, but you always ignore it. But when you finally take a step back and look, like, oh no, that notification is letting me know that I'm about to do this. I'm about to make a bad decision. I'm about to revert back to who I was. It's almost like recognizing another language. Like, dang, bro, like, that used to look like hieroglyphics to me, but now I understand exactly what it was. And I say that, man, because you got to realize and you got to recognize. If you refuse to recognize the shit that you do, you will always do the shit that you do. And this is another thing that you have to take into consideration. I made that decision overnight. I said that Monday night, walked into Tuesday with the mindset. This was a 6-month process, though. Okay. And I'll say it again. This was a 6-month process. The idea and the decision happened overnight. The process, you feel me? That took a while. And I will say that, man, because I don't know who need to hear it. A lot of times, bro, you think that the process and the decision gonna have the exact same timeline. That's not how this playing out. On January 1st, you said that you wanted to get your shit together. You wanted to do X, Y, and Z New Year's resolution. There's a process to this, though. You feel me? And if there's a process, there's got to be setbacks, too. And when I say that there's setbacks, you don't think I ain't get my ass chewed for some bullshit that I was on after making this decision? If you think that I didn't, you are completely wrong, bro. Like, I'm talking about, I made this decision on Monday. I walked in Tuesday and got my ass chewed before child even started. Because it's a process and there's setbacks. And the thing is that if you refuse to recognize your setbacks, recognize your patterns, recognize your behaviors, you ignore them notifications, you feel me? You gonna stay in that hole. You said that you wanted to get yourself together before the summer. But you also failed to recognize the fact that when shit don't go your way, you don't want to do it. When you have a bad day, you want to sit in the dark away from everybody. And you don't want to do anything. All of a sudden, you ain't got the energy for it. You got to recognize that. Because when it happens, you feel me? You got to be prepared to overcome that. Another thing that I did, man, as I was building this process, because once again, it's a process. I paid attention to everybody, okay? I paid attention and I started to create who I wanted to be. See, when you writing that narrative about yourself, right? When you write that narrative about yourself, you have the opportunity to be able to create who you are going to be in the future. You got this idea of to be able to design who you want to be in the future. And that's exactly what I did. I started paying attention to other people to add to the blueprint of who I wanted to be in the future. I ain't just create something out of thin air. I had references. I paid attention to the guy that was very sarcastic, but he always said real shit. I had mentors. You know what I mean? I had mentors. And I liked the way that Kerry carried himself, but I loved Duran's command presence. So I would take those two and add that to me. And I wanted to say to myself, what did they do to get to that point? I looked at the best Marine there. And I also said, nah, I don't want to do that one. Because although I looked at the best Marine there, I didn't like that aesthetic. I didn't feel like that aesthetic would fit me. You know what I mean? Like I felt like it wouldn't be authentic to who I was. And that's something I will say. A lot of times, man, like when we create these blueprints for who we are, we get so honed in on trying to create it the exact same way that somebody else is that you're not realizing, man, like that aesthetic, that don't fit you. That style, that don't fit you. That blueprint, that don't fit you. You know what I mean? And because you're trying to make it fit you, it ends up not being for you. And you end up just falling to the wayside and quitting. So as we sit back and talk about aesthetics, you also got to understand, man, like the aesthetics, that's got to match. The people that you keep around you, that's got to match. You saying that you want to get your shit together, you feel me? You want to get your shit together, become a better version of yourself. But you hang around people that ain't trying to do that, okay? You hang around them because they're good company. Not realizing, though, is that when you recognize your piss poor behaviors, they will comfort it and say it's okay. They will give you grace. Not realizing that you need to be told that, nah, bro, you on some bullshit, keep on going. You got to have the right people around you. And that's exactly what I started to do. I started to surround myself around the right people. But most importantly, as you write this new narrative for yourself, you also got to be patient with yourself. You're going to have setbacks. I made a decision on Monday. I got my ass chewed on Tuesday. It would be very easy for me to just revert back to who I used to be and say, fuck it. But you got to have patience. The decision may have been made overnight, but the process, that took 6 months. And with that being said, man, as we close out this episode, we still got February, we still got March, all the way down to December. All right? The year just started. So if you fell off the wagon, you can get back on. Don't trip. Your New Year's resolution gonna happen.
And just like that, another extraordinary thought left this ordinary mind. I hope you enjoyed this episode half as much as I enjoyed making it. Don't forget to head on over to your favorite streaming platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and leave this podcast an honest review because this podcast deserves to grow just as much as we do. Also, don't forget to head on over to TikTok or Instagram and follow me at Meech Speaks. That's right, Meech Speaks. Meech is spelled M-E-E-C-H. Stay motivated, stay healthy. I'm out.